So I got a request to do the Crimson Court in a Nemesis pairing video, and who am I if not your humble provider? I have some plans for other warbands as well, but that's nothing that can't wait. So let's get going with the vamps. The vamps are about the best 2 damage dealers in the game, with maybe Drepper being on par, and maybe they are even more solid. But these guys are very reliable in dealing out medium damage across the board. There is a solid foundation to build upon for several aggro builds probably, and maybe some against type builds as well. They have decent moves as well, and more than a few tricks up their sleeves. Maybe it's in their defense they are a bit more lackluster. Duval does go to 2 block, but that won't happen until earliest your second round. Enias goes to 2 dodge, which is decent, and Velas gets guard, which is okay, but still just 1 die, which will make you very susceptible to crits being undefendable paired with a single success. Both Duval and Gorath are spellcasters, although only level 1 and with no spell attack action. Gorath's Vile Transference is a really solid spell though, in its right circumstance, which can really skewer things in your favor. In terms of who to inspire first, it really depends on your opponent. If you need to put out a lot of damage, Bloodthirsting Duval is probably better than inspiring him, while inspiring Gorath, on the other hand, takes him to 3 damage. Bloodthirsting Velas is more useful versus hordes, especially with this upgrade, which you can afford to take now with the new salvage rule. Versus more defensive, sturdy fighters though, her inspired side gives her cleave and ensnare, which is pretty solid with 2 hammers, really forcing your opponent to land that crit. Enias is almost always better inspired, unless you for some reason need to have an immense amount of move, and with cards like Gathered Momentum, etc. rotated out, it's not really called for anymore. Also, 3 hammers is awesome. So let's check the pairings, shall we? We are in a very good spot with this Diachasm warband with a really solid deck and lots of scoreable searches from the get-go, so we don't really need an immense amount of complementing for starters. I believe the challenge is in the warband's end phase objectives, with cards like Red Ruin being really matchup dependent, and another 2 glory end phase like Death's Domain being pretty far-fetched as well. We need some solid 2 glory end phases here. Previously, you could play this warband both passively and aggressively, with a hunger collecting off build being really cheesy, but strong as well. Basically, you could skulk about in your corner, just collecting hunger. I think I managed to get Gorath to 30 plus hunger at one point, and I've heard of people getting him far higher than that. The Hungering Harpoon was a really solid upgrade for them in this build. Really fun times, but I digress. So with the main play style of the warband being fairly aggressive, going forward is our main interest here, and that's what we want to be looking at mainly. So the first deck that piques my interest here is the Daring Delvers. I recently read on Path to Glory of an interesting pairing between Headcrackers and the Daring Delvers, and given the fairly similar playstyle between these warbands, it should probably suit these guys as well, and I think it's pretty solid. We don't really need to swap out any search objectives, but I've added in Pathfinders as I've found it to be quite scoreable. Have an exploration count of 2 in round 1, done. And it's not that much harder later on either. In the end phase we can find a fair few solid objectives that raises our glory ceiling a bit, with Cautious Venture requiring 2 fighters in enemy territory and 3 counters, while Claim Guardians require 5 counters on 2 objectives held. Neither feels that far-fetched, to be fair, with 4 mobile and decently survivable fighters. Survivalists requires each fighter to be on a feature token or cover hex or have an upgrade, while Bold Venture needs our leader to be in enemy territory on a cover hex, lethal hex or feature token. Pretty straightforward, really. Gravelords and Recovered Poise are the infection solid B inspired cards to finish off the objective deck. In the Gambit allotment I've taken 5 cards from the Universal deck and 5 from the faction deck for a solid spread covering all bases. There's stuff in there to increase our exploration, ping opponents and push fighters, while some essential faction cards just can't be left out. In the upgrade allotment we mainly need to make sure we have a fair few cards with the Explorer keyword. The effects are nice and all, but it's not the main focus. This deck should work fine and could be a lot of fun with the vamps. Just keep in mind that the hunger reaction collides with some of the reactions on the explorer upgrade, so plan accordingly. This is probably the case with a lot of cards in this video, so yeah, keep that in mind. Yeah, I forget that kind of stuff all the time. Next up is Tooth and Claw. This is basically your old staple aggressive pairing, which really requires little to no thinking. Go forth and slay. I've kept all of the searches again, as they are simply more passive and reliable than the ones here, with the addition of the autoscore Embraced Savagery. In the end phase I've taken Focal Point, which is really solid, leader in enemy territory with at least 2 fighters within 2 from at least 2 different warbands. Hurricane Force is a bit of a reach, but we need to be a bit brave. Getting into enemy territory is the easy part, but with hard aggro and a bit of funnel and killing, the second part could be scored as well. Move or Die is just an auto score, while we've added in Red Ruin from the faction deck here for this more offensive build. You could go with Blood Curse as well for a heavier but more backloaded glory, if you prefer, but I'm not personally a fan of third end phase glory bricking my hand. In the gambits we've added in Tenebrious Form, since it's pretty solid for both Enyas and Velas, and frankly we didn't need as many of the universes from here, so I needed something extra from the faction deck. Also it works pretty well with Mark of the Stampede, since beasts can't hold anyway. But that's not hugely important. Call to Heal is amazing push. Dark Command is very reliable silly ping damage to finish off for setting up a kill search, and since they mostly do 2 damage, a bit of help can go a long way here. Internal Surrender is amazing and doesn't come with a negative for the 1 defense fighters, and Savage Season could give us a lot of healing, but try to time it towards the end of the phase as to not give out too many free staggers on your fighters. Upgrades, I've added in some stuff from the faction deck here that I didn't include for the previous deck, with Deathly Majesty and Ripping Claws for extra killy Hellboy fun times. From the Tooth and Claw gifted Ferocity is amazing, with being applicable to everyone except Gorath since he is range 2. Mark of the Stampede for extra charge distances, and Stubborn to the Bone could be really nice on an inspired Duval for example. It's basically Champion's Fortitude. The no push addition there is really tasty as well. So summing it up, less tricksy brainy deck, but probably a very solid pick as well. Let's look at the Fearsome Fortress. This deck works for a lot of warbands, and I think the vamps could make use of it as well. It will focus less on killing stuff than both previous ones, and go a bit more heavy into passive reliable searches. I've actually removed the all on the opponent's side with supernatural speed, I think it's called, since it doesn't really synergize all that well with this deck as a whole, but it could still make it in here if you wanted to, especially in the later rounds it's quite scoreable. I've added Bold Sortie, Earthworks and Raw Materials from Fearsome Fortress, as they are pretty silly, easy, passive glory. Bold Sortie takes a bit of a setup, sure, but with a couple of pushes or the walking wall, it's a breeze. From the faction end phases I've removed Red Ruin, since that won't be our main focus here, but I've added in Death's Domain for a bit of hold. With some flipping you could limit the amount of objectives on each side as well to make it more scoreable. And with at least 1 objective in no man's land, this should be doable as well. Conquer Domain, Raise the Walls and Stockpile finishes off the objective deck. Both the Search Raw Materials and Raise the Walls should be pretty easy now that the Plunder reaction is way stronger. In terms of ploys, I've doubled down on the healing with Blood Vial and Healing Ward. When playing Hold, you don't want your warband to break apart too early. Quicksilver Advance is an amazing card for both Hold and Aggro, while Startling Competence can push you onto an objective that they were just shoved off of. Determined Push can push you onto the objective you just pushed enemy off of, while Redeploy and Take Your Position is more pushy goodness. Tanglebriar gets more tokens on the board, so we should have a lot of utility here to score the deck. For upgrades I've gotten rid of Ripping Claws, but kept some offensive punch with the Vampiric Might. Bold Engineer and Rapid Defender are a bit of situational, but they could give you crucial, albeit telegraphed fighter or feature token pushes off. Bold Engineer will also score you Earthworks. Walking Wall is the top upgrade here, with a lot of amazing synergy left and right for the deck as a whole, while Stalwart Sentinel will keep you on the critical feature tokens. So that's it for Fearsome Fortress. Not my favorite deck to play maybe, as it is a bit too much passive glory, maybe a bit too uneventful for me personally, but if it is your jam, it's gonna be a very solid pick. I'm gonna take a pass on the Beastbound Assault, although it's not undoable. I'm gonna focus my efforts on the decks here that seems like really good picks for the style and size of the warband. Let's move on. Seismic Shock will as well be passed. We do indeed have 2 wizards here, but they are both level 1 without the chalice, and although there are a few solid cards in here for potential off-build, I don't think it's the best match. Toxic Terrors. I don't think this deck is terribly strong, to be fair, but I do think it plays well into the aggressive cookie cutter playstyle of the Vamps. I've kept all of their own searches and complemented them with taking advantage for having as many friendly in enemy territory as there are enemies there, which suits their playstyle well, +1 glory if you score it in the first round. Could be 2 fairly easy glory versus elites. In the end phases I've removed Death's Domain and added in Red Ruin again, and complemented the deck with 3 pretty solid and fairly easy 2 glory end phases, which I think is the Toxic Terror's real strength. The effects of the cards, especially the upgrades, aren't terribly strong, but the passive glory collecting in the end phases is pretty neat here. Capable Poisoners requires 1 successful attack in the round, and the poison upgrade on at least 2 fighters, very doable. Superiority confirmed is pretty easy as well. Move your leader into enemy territory and kill enemies worth at least 4 wounds. Fits them well, and Duval is probably the most survivable. Inspire him and put the Von Marussi armor on him and you're probably good. Venom Gorge needs a poison upgraded fighter to hold an objective in enemy territory. For 2 glory that's very reasonable. 17 fairly reliable glory is not bad at all. For ploys I've taken 3 poisons, maybe that's 1 too few, but there's a possibility of a bit of a recycle here with a specific upgrade. Choking Venom gives your fighters Grievous until a successful attack is done, so it could obviously do nothing if you don't roll the crit, but still succeed. But the possible damage boost is neat for a warband that mostly does 2 damage. Freezing Venom and Ill Prepared is really nice and annoying. Control while keep the forest at bay and no safe ground provides pushes, which is always useful for any playstyle. In the upgrade department I've gone a little bit heavier on the poison keyword, as we want to score those 2 glory end phases reliably with the inclusion of 5 poison upgrades. They're mostly there for the keyword honestly, and the effects, while good when triggered, are fairly situational. Ripping Claws is back for this more aggressive deck build as well. This should be a fun deck to play with a good mix of aggro and control and a side order of hold. Moving on. The Void Cursed Thralls I'm gonna take a pass on. I do think the deck is super solid, but giving up Duval's and Enya's 2 block and 2 dodge respectively and Gorath's spell action seems like a stretch when we have enough other solid options. Paths of Prophecy seems like a pretty fun playing against type endeavor, to be fair, and I think it is a deck that could be a lot of fun. For searches I've ditched Supernatural Speed, since you might not necessarily want to go only forward with this whole deck. But as I said earlier, you could very well include it. Crimson Hounds and Spirited Attempts are solid enough to stay around though. All part of the plan is especially scoreable in the later rounds, but could also be pulled off early depending on the size of the opposing warband. Devoted Offerings is pretty flexible, and playing 3 ploys in a round is solid passive glory. Hanging On has good support via Quicksilver Advance paired with Tread the Path, while Held in a Bloody Fist is just dirt easy. For the end phases, Death's Domain is back, while a Dire Omen and a Sign from the Gods require you to hold specific values, but fairly easy to do so. Portents of Doom is a bit more far-fetched, but once you get the manipulating upgrades out, it should be doable. For the ploys, a fair few of their own cards support the playstyle. I've added in Driven to the Hunt for potential extra push. Sure, it's bound to the leader, but he's likely to stick around. Inconstant Prediction gives you guard on the fighters you want to stick to the objectives, while slinking in there is a 2 push to an objective. That's amazing. Succor Uncertainty paired with Blood Vial is sweet healing, so your warband don't crumble too early, while Tread the Path is a free move with the number of hexes equal to the number of objectives you hold. Probably only 1 or 2, but still solid as a variant push and helps you score hanging on. For the upgrade I've gone very heavy with the Paths deck with only Von Marussi and Blood Chalice staying. I could see a case for the -1 adjacent card as well, but there are so many good cards here. Deadly Defiance is a hybrid push, while Guided by Fate is amazing accuracy for being on a feature token or attacking someone, that is. Inviolate Prophet is incoming accuracy debuff while staying on objectives, while Protected by the Unseen is +1 defense on number 4, 5 and 6, so that's 3 eligible objectives, and even 4 with Unhallowed Aura, which is also included in the deck, of course. Manipulating the values are important to pull off the end phases. Stubborn Stance is a double-edged sword, so plan accordingly. You can't push yourself either, but it's strong if used wisely. The Helping Hand could get you into holding the correct values as well. That's it for Paths of Prophecy. Not a deck I initially thought would synergize that well, but it is pretty solid for a lot of warbands actually, after seeing it work well with the Dread Pageant in our recent battle report. If you haven't checked that out already, go ahead and do so. Breakneck Slaughter, the go-to aggro deck nowadays almost, and it should fit these edgelords quite well. Beat to the Punch is Courtly Hunt Light, while Gale Force should also fit them very well. The rest of their own searches are strong enough to not warrant a removal. In the end phase, Red Ruin is back, while On the Chase is an obvious inclusion with all the move that is in this deck. Rapid Strike is a solid aggro deck pick, which pairs off nicely with Red Ruin, and Eager for the Fight is super solid as well. Just don't mess it up with Quicksilver Advance. I've taken 11 ploys and 11 upgrades here, but there's room for a bit of salvage, so that's fine, I think. Devastating Charge and Reckless Charge are amazing for aggro warbands, while Screech to a Halt and Sia removes the randomness of the impetus. In the upgrade allotment, there's a bit of everything. Mirror Duelist for Velas could make her into a scything machine versus hordes, while Rippling Claws could make Enyas quite the force to be reckoned with. And it's not a big deal if they perish. Salvage is a thing now, and we have cards to spare. Moving Mark could buff one of our defensively weaker fighters. Gorath comes to mind. A hungry Gorath with 5 wounds and 2 shields is pretty Kanan level nasty. The rest of the stuff is mostly move and hand over your momentum counter stuff. A fun, fast-paced and well-rounded aggro deck. So, Force of Frost. We do have 2 level 1 wizards here, so there's obviously a play here, so let's try. We're mostly going to make this deck work for the aggressive playstyle though, with a small side order of ice counters and a bit of spell work with buffed wizards. Let's look at the searches first. Courtly Hunt, Crimson Hound's Preternatural Speed and Spirited Attempt completes the faction searches with Break the Ice for dealing the first damage in the round, and Cold Blooded for taking someone out in enemy territory. You could easily swap that one out for Superlative Skill though, so it's really preference. In the end phase, we've taken our staple Gravelords and recovered Poise, but also Red Ruin, while the Force of Frost gives us Chill of the Grave, which is seriously just too good. Cold of the Void is probably more end game, but having no adjacent fighters is generally fairly scoreable for a solid 2 glory, while Winter's Hunger takes some investment, but definitely scoreable with having 3 ice counters with the ploys and upgrades we take to complement this. Let's look at the ploys. Fallen Shards places a blocked hex token with the potential to give us ice tokens as well. Frozen to the Spot is mostly annoying control, but very fun. We've taken 3 spells, which seems bold with level 1 wizards, since all of these spells cast on 1 focus and not channel, but with the upgrades we've complemented the Blood Chalice with, they should go off mostly. Final Curse could ping back 2 damage when a friendly wizard is taken out of action. Huge Swing when it triggers, and with 2 wizards from start, we should get an opportunity to play it. Good enough, I think, the effect to warrant the randomness of the card. Freeze, Thaw, Finish and Yara's Frozen Bonds gives us ice while having other effects with ping and move tokens to complement them. In the upgrade allotment, the stuff that buffs our wizards to level 2 are auto-includes, obviously, which both Armor of Ice and Everwinter Staff does. Everwinter Staff could even give us a 3rd wizard. Frostworm Cloak is solid ice counter collecting, and Cool and Calm buffs our wizard level and gives us reroll with a possible card action to get that crucial 3rd ice counter to score Winter's Hunger. I think this looks really fun. For the Vamps, Breakneck Slaughter is probably a bit more cookie cutter, but this is solid as well. So this brings us to the last of these decks and the Malevolent Masks. Although this is quite a weird and tricky deck to wrap your head around, I think we could make it work. Let's try it. So in the search department I've kept 4 of our own cards with Audacious Aspect having 2 solid ways to score it, both being fairly feasible, and Domino Dominance is also solid passive glory for having a surviving inspired fighter with a mask. A bit sad it's not scoreable in the first run with these guys, but I think it's solid enough anyway. Gravelords, Recovered Poise and Red Ruin will go in as this deck is fairly aggressive. Completed Pact is most far-fetched here, but for 3 glory it may well be scoreable in the second round if our attacking is somewhat on point, and these guys are fairly reliable. Totally Overpowered rounds out the objective deck for holding 2 and wounding and or killing more than half of the opposing warband. That may sound tough, but I think the and or wounding them sells it for me. That should be doable, and holding 2 is fairly easy with 4 decently survivable fighters. We've kept most of our staple ploys here with some really strong mask ploys to finish it off. Hooded Rush is a solid 1-hex push, potentially 2 if you have a mask on. Very strong. Maskborn is amazing as it lets us revisit the game board with a dead fighter to do a free action. Great stuff, could render us a crucial kill and really skewer the game in our favor. Shuddering Violence could give us both +1 dice and a reroll for the cost of a stagger. I'll take it. Taking Over lets us do one of the strong mask upgrade actions for free. Those include +1 damage for the round or a reroll for the round, so that could be a real game changer. Unveiled Ambitions aren't maybe super crucial, but searching for a mask upgrade doesn't hurt. We can pick any one of them we want, not just the first one we find, and I think that's a very neat little thing. Upgrades then. We've kept a fair few of our own staples, with Rippling Claws and Vampiric Might buffing our own punchiness. Then it's basically just a case of filling out with enough mask upgrades to render the deck synergy strong enough. That's it for today's episode. I'm not gonna rate these, but rather I think all of the ones I did decks for should be doing fine. Breakneck Slaughter is probably a favorite aggro deck right now, so I know that one will work wonders, but I think a lot of these are looking pretty juicy. So have fun with this flavorful and strong, and I believe rather popular warband. The models look amazing and they have performed well consistently since they appeared back in Dire Chasm. My next installment of this series will probably be something more old school, but let's see, I have a specific idea in my head. But if you have any requests or suggestions, go ahead and type them down below. All of the likes and comments help the algorithm out, and I'm very thankful for you following along on my YouTube journey. I'm gonna let the end credits roll now. Take care. This is Mats again, chiming in to thank you for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe, like and comment, and to not miss out on future content, ring the bell as well. And if you really liked this video, feel free to click the thanks button just below this video. And if you want to support me even further, you can now become a channel member and claim the title of Critical Focus fan. Until next time, take care, bye.